And good night. Welcome to Conversation with Rickford Burke. Good night to everybody. I'm already getting all of these messages. Wow, you guys are on point. Good night, good night, good night. Vibrant White, good night, good night. So, welcome to Conversation with Rickford Burke. Today, of course, is Tuesday, November 7th. I'm here in New York, and I have two very interested, important guests with me tonight. Please share the link, everybody. Get into all your Guyanese groups and share the link. If you are not following me on Facebook, please follow me on Facebook. Whatever platform you're watching this show on, like, follow, subscribe. Like, follow, subscribe. And share. So share the link, everybody. Text me, let me know where you're watching from. I hope you're having a good time. You had a good couple of days so far in this week, and you continue to have a great week. Here in New York, it's just about 9 p.m. Out on the West Coast, it's just about 7 p.m. So good evening to you guys on the West Coast. If you're watching me all the way from Africa, Asia, Europe, good morning to you. And if you're watching me from Guyana and the Caribbean, good night. Wherever you're watching me from, I hope you're having a good day. Text me, let me know where you're watching from. I see Avis Robertson from New York. Good night. Deborah Lewis, good night here in Brooklyn. Good night to you. Listen, the government of Guyana say you guys live in Brooklyn and in basements here in Brooklyn. Brenda Casey, good night. Idris Williams, good night. Jacqueline, wow, that went by very quickly. Jacqueline Tuesday, good night. Somebody watching from St. Kitts, Mavis, good night. Keep sharing the link, everybody. Share the link. I'll be back in 60 seconds and we'll get the show on the road. Share the link. Thank you. Welcome to Conversation with Rickford Burke. So tonight we're talking Venezuela. This is a big topic, and I'm not sure that the people in Guyana realize the gravity of this situation. I'm not even sure the government of Guyana realize the gravity of this situation. And for those of you who are not aware and watching for the first time, Venezuela has laid claim to Essequibo. And the government of Guyana had taken that controversy rather, to the International Court of Justice for a final determination. As far as Guyana is concerned, and as far as international law is concerned, there is no controversy, there's no dispute. This matter was, Venezuela had laid claim to Guyana previously, this matter was settled. Excuse me, and I'll go through some of that details so that our young people can get a fairly good understanding of the issue. So the matter is currently sub judice in the International Court, meaning it's before the court. The court is deliberating on the matter and will soon pronounce its judgment. So Venezuela is like, this don't look good for me. So we are going to keep sharing the link, everybody. We're not going to obey. We don't respect the court. We're not part of that process, even though they did appear before the court to dispute its jurisdiction. The court ruled that it did have jurisdiction. It's the international court. Why would it not have jurisdiction? And so Venezuela is now planning, as far as our information goes, planning some sort of occupation, possibly, or some sort of violation of Guyana's territorial integrity. And in order to get a mandate from the people of Venezuela, they have scheduled a referendum on December 3rd. And the referendum has, I think, 5 questions, but one of the questions is seeking to give the government of Venezuela a mandate to go and take Essequibo. Right? That's Venezuela. Like, hey, that belongs to us. We like that place. It has a lot of natural resources. There's oil right offshore Guyana. We want all of that. We're greedy, so we're gonna go take it. That's Venezuela's posture right now. So keep sharing the link, everybody. So that's where we are. And then we have another problem. We have migrants from Venezuela flooding Guyana. As far as my information goes, they are being mobilized by the government. And that seemed to be true because the vice president of Guyana, Barjack, they secretly met with some of these migrants and told them the government will take care of them. Yeah, we'll give you ID cards. We want you guys to vote in the election. So this controversy on the Guyana side is pretty it seemed to be inconsistent, oxymoronic, right? So you have the government saying, hey, Guyana belongs to us. They're not even saying it convincingly, as far as I'm concerned, but they're saying it. And they're saying that we should have a national position, but then they're attacking the opposition sometimes, but they want the opposition to support them. But then you have the vice president signaling to Venezuelans to come to Guyana. Keep sharing the link, everybody. So we are in this quagmire. And to help us sort out this quagmire, we were to have 3 experts, Member of Parliament, Amanza Walton Desir, who is the Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs. She's a spokesperson in Parliament on Foreign Affairs for the opposition. And she is a little under the weather tonight, so she will not be joining us. We'll have her on subsequently. But then we have Attorney at Law and former Chief of Staff of the Guyana Defense Force, Dr. Gary Bess. Dr. Bess.
Hello, Rick, and to all the viewers, good night.
The distinguished Rear Admiral.
Distinguished Rick Ford, yes.
Thank you. And then we have a foreign policy expert, former ambassador, Guyana ambassador to a number of countries, including China, Ambassador Ronald Austin.
Good night.
Good night, sir. We're not seeing you as yet. I'm not sure. There you are. Good night, sir.
Good night. Good night to Dr. Best too.
Good night, Ambassador. It's always a pleasure.
This is a very distinguished panel. Keep sharing the link, everybody. I'm trying to So we're operating kind of virtually tonight. Some of my technical guys are not here, so I'm also deputizing as one. We're trying to. All right, I think I got it. Trying to line us all up right here.
Mm-hmm.
Good, good.
Ah,
So
looks good.
let me center up here. All right. So that was just my introduction. It's a little political. I know you guys are not political people necessarily, but I want to start off by asking Ambassador Austin. I mean, you are a foreign policy giant. When I was at the risk of dating you, when I was a teenager working for Desmond Hoyt, you were there advising him on foreign policy as well as Dr. Grant and others. Um, from your foreign policy expertise, do you think the government of Guyana is taking this matter seriously? And should we be having a very robust, public, aggressive international campaign to isolate Venezuela and expose their attempt to grab and infringe on Guyana's territory?
Redford, I want to begin by saying that, as you indicated, I've been doing this for a very long time. And what is very disturbing to me this time around, Venezuela mobilizing troops on the border. They've gone into overdrive politically within their own country. What is troubling me is when I look at what is going on in my own country. And I start with 2016, when we interviewed a young woman to be an FSO. An FSO, as you know, is a foreign service officer. You seem to have disappeared, Rickford.
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Yes. And we asked this young woman, who was a prospective diplomat, what were her views on the border controversy. And she replied rather quickly and rather blithely and said that we should make a concession. This is somebody applying to join the foreign ministry in 2016. It was quite shocking. I tell you this because I want to move from there to generalize about what I've noticed going on in the country at the present time. Even though we're facing this rather critical situation, I don't get the impression, maybe because Guyanese are distracted by trying to live on a day-to-day basis, or they're consumed by other personal matters. You don't get the kind of patriotism that one saw in the 80s. And I think this has a lot to do with the fact that most people at this time, and don't forget you're dealing with a generation now who know very little about the border controversy. And correspondingly, there is no major education program going on. And some time ago, I think the government asked Kit Nascimento and that fellow who's a writer, I forgot his name right now, to provide information on the border controversy. But it started in a very haphazard way and eventually petered out. I think this is a very worrisome sign. If we're going to counter Venezuela diplomatically and otherwise, the first thing we have to do is to have our population educated about what is the significance of the border controversy, because you're playing with 5/8 of Guyana. And if you don't have the information to convey to people, to get them to understand what it is they're facing, I think you're going to have a very serious problem on your hands.
Who has responsibility to educate the public?
The government.
Do you think the government is doing a good job? Well, obviously not, because you say you're amazed that the public is not educated about that.
No, but if you compare what was going on in the 80s, it was in the schools, it was in the street, it was in the songs, it was at the university. We had academics from Cuba studying the border controversy, helping us to do research in the matter. We had the trade unions whenever they had the congresses dealing with the border controversy, the NGOs, the six forms. That is not happening now. Well, if it's
Um,
happening, I haven't seen it.
so I am of the view that patriotism in Guyana is lost somewhere. I tell you why. Um, we had an event here some years ago, probably just before COVID, and they were playing the song from Pacaraima's "Speaks of Power," or whatever, and
Hmm.
quarantine, whatever. I don't even remember all the words of the song. Um, and one of the young ladies in the audience said, "Wow, I don't know when last I heard that PNC song." So, and it's because throughout from 1992 down to now, or let's say at least up to 2015, to me, the nation wasn't encouraged to be patriotic. And certain people in the society saw patriotism as being associated with the PPP, so it was discouraged. We don't hear those songs anymore. We don't sit. I don't know if we teach them in the schools, but I don't know any nursery school child, primary school child who knows those songs, who knows about the Venezuela border issue, who understands it, who even knows about the potential of Essequibo. So I'm wondering if it is not a deliberate tactic, somewhere along a political tactic, to disassociate the population from the kinds of strategies that would make Guyanese patriotic, because it would have associated them with the PNC, the APNU, the opposition, or whatever it is. And the government did not want that, because then people would then tend to be loyal or gravitate towards the opposition. Is that part of it? Do you see it that way?
But Rickford, I hope you're wrong, because if you're right, then it's a very dangerous thing to do. You know, um, I don't think you need to whip the country up into frenzy, but you need to prepare them. They have to be patriotic. They have to support their country, and you can't ask me to support my country when I don't know what I'm supporting.
Right.
The only way I can give you my support is that you have to give me the information and tell me, look, this is what we're facing, this is what we intend to do, and these are our objectives. That we need to keep this country whole and entire, and that any country that comes in to take 5/8 of it, we're going to oppose them. But you can't have the people operating in a vacuum as far as knowledge is concerned, as far as information is concerned. Um, you're asking for trouble. When you turn to them eventually at some critical moment, and the brigadier, I forgot what rank, Gary or brigadier, I think, isn't it? Forgive me if I forgot.
Rear
Rear admiral,
admiral.
rear. Um, when you get into a crunch, as might happen, this is not the usual Venezuelan adventurism. This is serious business here on the border. Very serious business. Yeah.
Now, my final question to you for this segment is: there's a very worrying occurrence. Guyana's facing this very serious threat from Venezuela, and we are getting some very worrying intelligence from officials here. Very troubling intelligence about Venezuela's activities. And you have the government encouraging Venezuelans to come. And I'm not sure if encouraging means going to Venezuela and bring them here, but at least accommodating them when they come here, changing the state apparatus, the operation of state apparatus to accommodate them, telling more of them to come, because there's a political calculation that they could harvest them for votes. Isn't that a dangerous situation? Because right now, I was talking to a government official who confirmed to me that Region 1 has at least 25,000 Venezuelans, which
They're
is
more.
equal
They're more.
or in excess of the population of Region 1. So
Yeah.
Venezuela has already occupied Region 1. Go ahead.
No, I was saying you're quite right, because I had it confirmed too that there are more Venezuelans than Guyanese in region one. But what I wanted to say to you is that You remember, if you had anything to do, Mr. Burnham, Mr. Hoyt, on the question of the border controversy, when you dealt with the matter within the government, everybody was on the same page. I get the impression in the current administration that I've heard what the vice president has said on the Venezuelan question. I have not heard anything on the president's side. And I can, it may be dangerous to assume that there seems to be two different tracks being along which the government might be proceeding. I haven't heard the president come out and confirm what the vice president said with regard to Venezuelans. He's anxious to have them here in Guyana, to have them get employment in Guyana, and so forth.
Actually, displaced Guyanese, and that's a political strategy. And I challenged somebody from the government on that today, and they said, well, he is doing that at the party level, but at the state level, we're acting differently. So you were correct. And then in Parliament, you had Anil Nanalal referring to them as refugees, and Gail Teixeira referring to them as economic migrants. And also, this government official that I spoke to today told me that the government has an obligation to accept them on international law. And I'm wondering, the government doesn't have an obligation to accept Haitians who are facing economic hardship as well under the same international law.
Well, I think when it comes to the Haitians, the government position is indefensible, because the kind of government concern you see over the Venezuelans, it was not so in the case of the Haitians. The Haitians were virtually, I don't want to say hunted down, but they were given such a hard time in Guyana that most of them left not very quickly. It is a black mark on my country as far as those Haitians are concerned. They made no effort to help those Haitians in any way, even though under the Treaty of Chaguaramas, those Haitians had a right to enter Guyana and stay there for 6 months. That's under the laws that one of the treaties that we signed, the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, and nobody said anything. I mean, I was talking to Carl Grenade, and forgive me for going on a bit about this matter, and it was really heartrending for some of us, because there was a moment when we were certain that these guys were being hunted down and being made to leave the country when they had a right.
And some of them were imprisoned.
Some were imprisoned, yes.
Right. Actually, I plan to ask you this as well. Finally, on this segment, Guyana has not have an ambassador in Venezuela since this government came to power. Very derelict. In the meantime, Venezuela has an ambassador gathering information, making analysis, and sending that information back to Caracas. How damaging is the fact that Guyana has not had an ambassador? They just named somebody, Dr. Richard Van Mistras, but I'm not sure that he has presented his credentials to the Venezuelan government as yet. How damaging is the absence of that ambassador in Venezuela to get clear assessments of what is happening down there and feed that information back to the government?
A moment ago, I told you it's very worrisome to see how relaxed and laid back we have been with the border controversy. And I would have thought the government coming into office in 2020, one of the first things they would have done is to look at making appointments to those key missions, Suriname, Brazil, and Venezuela.
The frontier.
The countries on the frontier. The fact that wasn't done, and it's not that this was not raised with the administration. I know it was based on my own information, and they sat there and allowed the situation to develop as it is right now. And now they're trying to get Dr. Van Mistras accredited. Now the Venezuelans always take advantage of circumstances where there is some confusion with Guyana, to put any ambassadorial appointment through the ringer. In the case of Cheryl Miles, it took her 3 months to get agreement. And when she got to Venezuela after 3 months, it took her another 3 months to present her credentials. And if my memory serves me right, Cheryl did not present credentials to Maduro. I think it's some low-level person in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I don't want to wish Dr. Van Rest ill, but when I left Guyana, I spoken to him on a few occasions. He hadn't gotten agreements yet, and I think the application went in about a month ago.
Thanks, Ambassador Austin. Dr. Bess, you're the defense expert here. You're the legal expert here. Two quick questions first on defense before I go to the legal aspect of it. We know Venezuelan soldiers have amassed on the border. We're not seeing corresponding movement and formation on our border by the Ghana Defense Force. And also, the regional chairman, and I keep raising this issue and it's not been addressed by the government, the regional chairman of Region 7, his region borders Venezuela, had complained that Venezuelan authorities had stopped him, and was checking his boat and his personnel that were with him, security, in on our soil. And the government did not send a diplomatic protest. The government did not issue a statement condemning it because it's political. The regional chair is from a different party. So how can we defend our country when the government, number one, is playing politics, number two, is derelict, and number three, I'm not sure that the Ghana Defense Force is being given the correct instruction. Shouldn't they be on the border? I mean, at least not in a provocative formation, but at least there to protect and reassure the nation that they're looking after the national defense.
But Rick, let me say that I have every confidence in the Ghana Defense Force and what it is capable of doing, given its resources. But at this point in time, I think the visibility of the GDF is what is important. And I agree that it ought to be more visible. It ought to be more visible now, and having regard to the fact that Region 1 in particular is the first easily threatened, that we would expect a higher visibility in Region 1, at least right now with the GDF, how they're currently deployed. I believe that would engender some amount of additional confidence in the nation as to what is happening. I was at UG Team Talks last evening, and one of the presenters, who's a psychologist, said to the audience that her son asked her whether or not Ghana will be invaded by Venezuela. Her son is 8 years old. It tells you what is happening across Guyana. Mm-hmm. There is a fair amount of concern, apprehension, and fear among Guyanese in relation to Venezuela. The leader of the opposition, in speaking yesterday, mentioned it would be almost idiotic to conclude that among the Venezuelans coming to Guyana under the threat of annexing Essequibo, that there aren't Venezuelan operatives coming in. I mean, we'll be stupid and foolish to believe, even if the government is saying so, that they don't have Venezuelan operatives coming in with these migrants who are arriving in Guyana illegally, not through a port of entry. So we have to conclude and assume that we have Venezuelan operatives in Guyana, intelligence operatives in Guyana, and therefore the clear and present danger is even more acute within the context of this visibility of the Ghana Defense Force. And I'm not knocking the Ghana Defense Force. It needs to be more visible at this point in time and create that atmosphere of more confidence by the population in the Defense Force at this time. Let me just make this point. Ambassador Austin spoke eloquently on the point. Venezuela's amassing of troops is not being done simply just to threaten Guyana or affect Guyana. There's a deeper interest involved here by Venezuela and by President Maduro. And I think you mentioned education, that unless we understand clearly the extent of the threat and educate the population, we will be in some serious challenges. I heard also that a comment being made from a government official that, Essequibo is ours. We all know Essequibo is ours, right? And perhaps that's the reason it was not taught over the years. While we teach geography, Essequibo belongs to Guyana. The issue is not Essequibo belonging to Guyana. The education issue is about the illegal claim against Guyana. And that is not, we've not been prosecuted. We did it we did it successfully in the 70s, and we did it in the 80s, where we were educating Guyanese that the claim by Venezuela against Essequibo is illegal. Because we all wake up and understand Essequibo is part of Guyana. Article 2 of our constitution gives us the borders of Guyana, which we inherited from the British, starting from the British Guyana constitution into the 1966, into the successive constitutions. It talks about our border. So we need to educate the people in Guyana that the claim by Venezuela against Guyana is illegal. Not focus so much on Essequibo, because Essequibo is enshrined in the constitution. I think the education needs to get to that stage. We also need to speak a language and convince the people so they can feel much more safe. Not only political rhetoric would help. And again, the final point I make in this area here is the fact that we have so many uncontrolled migrants coming into the country. From my own analysis, they're all illegal migrants until the status is cleared up, whether or not they have legitimacy becoming Guyanese, or whether they can become refugees, or whether they're economic migrants. I wrote a piece and I mentioned that Guyana should institute an immediate halt to any further Venezuelans arriving in Guyana, declare an amnesty, and during that amnesty, we get a sense of who is in Guyana, those who qualify for citizenship, those who can become economic migrants, and those who those who meet the status of refugees. But underscoring that recommendation in the public domain, for me, underscoring that recommendation is an agreement between the government of Guyana and the opposition on the additional numbers of persons that Guyana can absorb. So it's not a question of us coming together and say, yes, let's convert everybody in Guyana who's all Venezuelan nationals into these categories, but determine how many more persons we can absorb in Guyana. Because our population, our health system was designed for 800,000 people.
If I can stop you on that to do a follow-up right on that point, how can Guyana even contemplate accepting more migrants, or even accepting these migrants or not sending them back, when Venezuela sees itself as being at war with Guyana? How can we accept people from a country that wants to take away 2/3 of the country? I'm trying to understand that policy, and how, from a defense point of view, doesn't the government's policy pursued by Bart Jagdeo compromise the GDF ability to defend the country? We're saying the GDF must go and defend Guyana. They must go on the border. They must be more visible. And you have the vice president saying, yeah, come to Guyana. These people, some of them are Guyanese, you know. So they're not Guyanese. We know that they're not Guyanese. That's his strategy of appeasing us from not being alarmed that the government is encouraging these people to come because they want them for a political purpose to harvest their votes. Doesn't it compromise the ability to defend the country when you have these two different positions, where you have the vice president encouraging these people and Guyana Defense Force probably strategizing how we can defend the country when from these people invading? Because suppose half of those people are are from the military in Venezuela, and at some point in time they'll just throw on their uniforms and pop up.
Well, Rickford, I think it is clear that the least the government should be doing right now, having regard to the fact that we're under a threat of annexation, is to close the borders. That's the least we should have done. Now, I hear the humanity argument that if they're fleeing from Venezuela, they should be able to come to Guyana. But at this point in time, we have a number of illegal Venezuelan migrants in Guyana, and we should close those borders immediately. And again, I'm making the point that having done so, we need to determine which category each person fits into, and against a number agreed to, and those persons who fit outside of the number will have to be repatriated back to Venezuela. I don't see the sense in us having more people coming in under the threat of annexation. It defeats common sense. But you know, there are two terms that I think we find important in these geopolitical discussion. One is strategic ambiguity, and the other one is strategic stupidity. You have to be careful in what we are.
I'm not sure stupidity could be strategic, but go ahead.
It can be, and there's a particular meaning attached to it. But at this point in time, I don't think Guyanese are feeling safe. The mixed signals are unhelpful. The Guyana Defense Force is a professional organization, and it is as an external point of view, it appears as though it's coming under significant pressure not to discharge its duties professionally and constitutionally. As a person on the outside, one gets that impression. My entry into this whole connection with Guyana and Venezuela came from enforcing our maritime laws as a Coast Guard officer. I understand that dimension. We arrested many Venezuelan vessels from illegally fishing our waters. So we've been defending the country on so many different fronts. So Guyana's assorted jurisdiction through its defense arm to defense assets. I personally was involved as a seaman officer dealing with the operating in the exclusive economic zone and pushing back against Venezuelan fishing vessels, and so we arrested them, we prosecuted them. That was how active the government was. We're not seeing it now. We don't have defense assets even to protect the offshore industry right now. We don't have any defense assets out there. So obviously there's a miscalculation between defense and development. They should work in tandem. We have a lot of development talks coming out of the oil and gas sector, but we don't have the entire sector ring-fenced with proper defense assets. So that is also a concern that I have, as a concern that many Guyanese have. And perhaps that is in driving some amount of fear and apprehension in the population that the government is not ready to defend them. And from my own personal point of view, I don't get the impression the government is prepared to or equipped with managing the situation. They need help, and they should call in the opposition and other experts, and we should work as a team to bring the situation under control.
If I could add to the question of the Venezuelans in Guyana, they've been coming into our country for quite a long time. If you move around Georgetown or different parts of the country, you discover that Venezuelans are everywhere. The government says there are 21,000. People will tell you it's much more than 21,000, and they're in some areas where it's going to be very difficult to reach them. I know, for example, up the Berbice River, there are quite a few Venezuelans there, and some of them have really gone into the areas of the society that most of us have not noticed.
Ambassador Austin, you touched on a point there of credibility. You had a very senior government officer acknowledging to me that there are over 25,000 Venezuelans in Region 1.
Over 25,000.
Over 25,000 in Region 1. Mm-hmm. And then you're just saying that the government is arguing it's 21,000. Do you trust the government to handle this situation?
No, because I think, as the Rear Admiral just said, they are not grappling with the situation, and they don't have the tools really to deal with the situation. That Venezuelan migrant question is a very difficult and complex question, and I don't think we have the expertise. I think we depend a lot on the IOM and the United Nations to help us formulate policy or to try and determine the extent to which we have migrants in our society in areas which we may not want to have them. I can't say more to you.
So I have to
take for example, Rickford. I have met Venezuelans who've got children who've been benefiting from government programs, but they're not Guyanese.
Well,
if I may, that brings into sharp focus what is being said by the man in the street. The man in the street is making his observation that this whole issue is being politicized.
Right.
That's what the man in the street is saying. Because if at the time when we're under this significant threat of annexation from Venezuela, there is direct encouragement of bringing more Venezuelans into Guyana, it is not easy in that calculus for the population to conclude that our population is a very active political population. But this has now become a political matter, and it's about trying to use these Venezuelans in such a manner that they make a contribution to the PVP in the next general elections. And I heard the vice president saying, what's wrong if they were to vote? The APNU should get them to vote or the coalition for them. But that's not the issue. Is not that. The issue is that the matter is being politicized, and therefore, if it is being politicized, the true and patriotic constitutional duties of agencies, those abilities and efforts are being stymied. And therefore, you send mixed signals through the entire body politic of the country. Those institutions are confused, because when they're required to do a particular job, they're hesitant because they're getting some direction that is political. So it is real political crossover into state institutions and government institutions that are required to do a specific job. So from my point of view, it appears as though it's being political. It appears as though the government is very, very, they do not want to, from my view, to offend the Venezuelan immigrant population, while at the same time, the presence of these uncontrolled numbers of Venezuelans are putting significant pressure on the entire socio-economic and political fabric of Guyana. Now, that is very dangerous, and that could be considered very unpatriotic. There's less care for Guyanese and more care for the
Exactly.
illegal migrants. And I have
So,
nothing against illegal migrants, but I have to put my country first. And we have to put Guyana first, irrespective of the situation in Venezuela. And my final point in this here, there's no international convention that says you must put your nation state in peril in order to solve a refugee problem of an adjoining state. There's no such international convention. We have obligations, yes, but not at the expense of our national security. And the government.
yeah, but they can go to Brazil, they could go to Venezuela, they could go to Ecuador, they could go to Colombia. Sorry, not Venezuela, Colombia. They could go to all these other countries. Why Guyana feels the obligation today is very suspect. And I want to raise three issues. One, this Venezuelan operative put out a video after meeting with Barjack. They were in this secret meeting, attacking the opposition and saying that the opposition is xenophobic and discriminatory against the Venezuelans and so on. Obviously, that was discussed or told to him to say at the meeting. And also, you have the Minister of Education working to assimilate these people into the schools and pressuring the schools to teach them Spanish. But at the same time, she is not enforcing some sort of strategy in the schools to teach our children from kindergarten. When I was in kindergarten, I learned about the Guyana-Venezuela border issue and went all through to primary school. She's not doing that. Her main focus, the government's main objective, is to get these Venezuelans in school. And the school must equip itself with Spanish-speaking teachers to teach them. GCON must now publish stuff in Spanish. The police must now have Spanish on their vehicles and have police officers who can speak Spanish. What is going on in Guyana? Is it that the government is preparing to hand Guyana over to Venezuela?
Well, I don't know if it's a rhetorical question, but I would say that it is very disconcerting, to say the least. But I know when migrant populations go to other countries and they assimilate in those countries, they learn the language of the country that they go to.
Exactly.
Even from across the world, people go to the United States and UK, they learn the language of the country they go to. So it's putting tremendous and excessive, burdensome costs in Guyana to try to put it into Spanish. We don't need to do that. Those who are legitimate in Guyana can learn English and be taught in English and assimilate into the Guyanese society by learning English. They would not lose their Spanish. They will remain bilingual. So again, it would raise suspicion with all these additional emphasis by the government in putting Spanish on police vehicles, which is absolutely ridiculous. And at the same time, in the education system, as you mentioned, that will raise suspicions because we only have so much amount of, even though money is fungible, we don't have that much available. So we should put our country first, our people first, and if there are those who can assimilate legally, should be encouraged to learn English, and we teach them in English. They will still be bilingual. So I have to agree with you, it raises suspicions. And the Guyanese population is highly suspicious of what is happening right now. And I know I'm speaking for the Guyanese population when I speak here. They're highly suspicious of what is happening right now in our country.
Still on defense. Go ahead, Ambassador.
If I may, I everything that Dr. Best and yourself have said, there's no need for any further argument on it. But I saw a video, and I hope Dr. Best has seen it, of Venezuelans beating a GDF soldier very badly. I thought it's very hard to watch because it appeared at one moment that one of these Venezuelan, well, according to the person who sent me the video, and I can send it to you in a couple of minutes,
Please
had
do.
a very long knife in his hand, and I thought he was going to kill the poor young officer. But this was a young GDF officer who was really being beaten very badly by persons that I'm told are Venezuelans. Now, Dr. Bess mention symbols. I don't know what is that intended to convey to Guyanese and to the average Guyanese. And why would Venezuelans decide to beat a GDF soldier, very young soldier? I'll send it to you in a few minutes.
I did see the video. It is the same video, and from my own intervention and questions, I understand that there is that such a video, but they're Guyanese and not Venezuelans. So yes, that is my understanding, because we saw the video. The soldier.
Oh, I saw that video then. If it's got, yeah.
Soldier, but
I apologize.
No, I'm saying that there's no evidence that suggests they're Venezuelans, and I can't say fact checked it because I listened, but I fact checked it with the institution itself, and the information is that they're Guyanese and not Venezuelans, and of course he is a soldier, right? So,
and as a matter of fact, the GDF headquarters said that he was AWOL for a year.
Yeah, it was absolute leave, and they went into that. But okay, again, it will send these kind of information, will send different kind of chills down Guyanese. And I could understand how it could be reported as Venezuelans doing this, and that sort of information could inflame the Guyanese population. And it brings us back exactly to where we are in terms of how we're managing the situation. From the time the government put out very positive statements about this uncontrolled influx of migrants, the country will begin to ease a little bit of its anxiety, and the government is doing nothing in that regard. They're saying they're migrants and we have to receive them. They're not saying that, listen, we can only receive.
But they don't have to. And they don't have to. We're under threat by the same country who's flooding us with their citizens.
I made that point earlier, but the point I'm making is that's what the government is saying. So the population is not comfortable with the statements of the government, and therefore there's a lot of anxiety in Guyana, and it's the government's responsibility primarily to remove that anxiety. Outside of that, then it's civil society and other leaders in the country to reduce that anxiety by coming on programs like yours and going into the community and speak. We have not seen a determined cabinet outreach, to use that umbrella term, going into these various areas, and the government doesn't have to worry. There's an opposition that exists, which is part of government and governance. There are people who exist that could form joint teams to go across this region and speak on events.
The government doesn't believe the opposition is part of the government.
Well, I'm speaking to the government here, not you, Rickford.
Dr. Best, I have an anxiety right now whether I'll be allowed to land in Georgetown.
After this program.
That is available. That is available.
After making the error that I made.
No, the opposition is,
but let me come back to defense. Gentlemen, let me come back to defense. Dr. Best, let me ask you, how can the Guyana Defense Force, I'm not asking you to divulge military strategy, but just from a layman's point of view, how can the Guyana Defense Force now defend Essequibo from a potential occupation/invasion by Venezuelans when there are over 25,000 Venezuelans in Region 1? How can they physically defend the country or defend that area in Essequibo if the Venezuelans military that has amassed their service members on the border, if they decide to now come over and starting with Region 1 and moving down to Region 7, how can the Guyana Defense Force mount an adequate defense to deter them and chase them back over the border?
Well, Rickford is a very important question. It's a complex question in a sense. Guyana Defense Force was never established to match Venezuelan forces. That was a political decision. I think it's a wise political decision. Within the Guyana, Venezuela, Suriname, the matrix, it's always been the defense policy of the government, and I suspect both governments, that we will just have parity or superiority with one of those three countries. And that would be our eastern neighbor. But in the west and south, we wouldn't even attempt to have parity. Because the cost of having a military to match those countries would be too very expensive. So how does the GDF defend Guyana? GDF is the second line of defense, because the first line of defense is defense diplomacy. If the defense diplomacy is effective, as it was in the 70s and 80s, two things will happen. We'll have significant statements in the international community condemning the action. We also have statements from allied nations signifying their intention to come to Guyana's aid, and we had that in the 70s and the 80s. We had a lot of support from Cuba and other countries, Yugoslavia, if you can recall. So we have countries indicating their intention to come to Guyana's aid, and that comes from your diplomacy, and therefore that would help that
serve as a deterrent.
signal to the Venezuela possible deterrence. That emboldens the Guyana Defense even more. But the Guyana Defense Force also has a duty on the ground to define aggression, identify and define aggression. Main role is to identify the threat, define the threat, and fight that threat at that point in time. Fight up to that point in time. And between that space is when the international community's effort would have allowed Venezuela to back off or to stay because they recognize there is help. Secondly, more recently, as you would know, we signed the RSS Treaty, the Treaty Regional Security System. Now, that is headquartered in Barbados. Guyana in 1990 deployed troops to Trinidad and Tobago to assist the A&R Robinson government during and after the coup, the Abu Bakr coup. We sent a company over there, and we helped and contributed to internal stabilization operations. And we were not a member of the RSS. That was Caribbean Committee. That's how we saw it. President Hoyt was president at the time. There was a resolution in Parliament to deploy the troops to go to Trinidad and Tobago. I understand that the RSS is not seen as a powerful body, but it will send a strong message. The headquarters is in Barbados, and therefore the resident Prime Minister of Barbados has a duty responsibility because the RSS is located there. So we should be hearing from the RSS via the Prime Minister of Barbados and the RSS coordinator what they intend to do in this situation, how best they can work with Guyana to support Guyana, if at all Venezuela comes through. Article 4 of the RSS treaty says an attack on one is an attack on all. This is a treaty organization. So I want to say, I mention it because it is not in the public domain. I raised it last night at the UGT talks. The government is not mentioning it, but the government spoke quite a lot about it when President Ali said that we sign in and we joining the RSS. So there's a CARICOM responsibility politically. There's a CARICOM and regional responsibility militarily to come to the aid of Guyana. And we need to speak more about it. We need to prosecute it more. I think all of that.
Are you talking about the same Prime Minister of Barbados that just posted the two Venezuelan leaders and just made a statement that seemed to appease Venezuela?
I just want to conclude by saying all of that will lead towards enabling the Guyana Defense Force to do its job as best as it can do. That's what the point I want to make, because it was never designed to fight Venezuela.
Dr. Best, what about the member states of the RSS?
Sorry?
The member states of the RSS. Quite a few of them are not, they have not proven to be good people as far as Guyana is concerned. I mean, in particular, I was single out St. Vincent, Mr. Ralph Gonzalez, I call his name.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he is exactly a friend of Guyana.
But he's a friend of the PPP. so there goes the problem. But let me. That's a good segue to diplomacy.
But
Ambassador,
could I finish?
Sure, go ahead.
When Maduro was wanted to revive Petrocaribe, I think within recent times, the person who volunteered to take the message in the region and beyond was Mr. Gonzalez.
Right. But then you had the Prime Minister of Barbados who hosted a meeting between the government and the opposition, brokered some sort of arrangement, and then she came on Guyana soil and appeased Venezuela by saying, well, we hope the two countries, equating aggression. She hopes the two countries, as if Guyana is demonstrating any sort of aggression towards Venezuela, will allow the region to remain a peaceful region, without saying that we in CARICOM support Guyana's territorial integrity. She made no such statement. She equated Venezuelan aggression towards Guyana with Guyana in an effort to appease Venezuela, because she probably wants Venezuelan oil. So we can't depend on CARICOM. CARICOM has never been, as far as I'm concerned, or demonstrated any significant support for Guyana in terms of these crises. So how can we support, depend on CARICOM? But let me ask you this. What should be our diplomatic posture? When I was a child, I remember Burnham dressed up in a little GDF uniform. See our friend doing the same thing now, looking like a comic. But I remember as a child listening with my parents to the radio as either Ashley Jackson or Burnham made speeches all over the world, met with heads of government all over the world to mobilize the world to support Guyana, exactly in terms of what Dr. Best was talking about, mobilizing people to support us, whether they send troops if Venezuela decides to occupy and so on. We're not seeing that. But we saw the government mobilize an entire half of the cabinet and came to Washington to pre-book our conference here. We are just meeting with our elected officials, right? And they felt the need to send the entire cabinet, send half the cabinet, plus they spent 300,000 US dollars, 60 million Guyana dollars to come up here and meet with officials to counter what they thought would be our message. So it seems as though the diaspora Guyanese are the enemies of the government rather than Venezuelans.
Richard, I think you're being a bit harsh on CARICOM because there's still a lot of people within the and I must say a word for CARICOM because I've got fond memories and association with their organization. But
are you talking CARICOM now or CARICOM then?
CARICOM now.
Okay.
CARICOM now.
Okay.
I think Mia Motley stepped out of her crease, as it were, you know. And what was very troubling about what she said is that she further implied that the statement issued by CARICOM in support of Guyana, she suggested that she had some difficulty with the statement. And she's been to Venezuela, and she signed a number of agreements with Maduro, but she is not all of CARICOM. And don't forget, you know, sometimes diplomacy is not often done in the public domain. And CARICOM has been extremely helpful to us, especially with organizations like the Commonwealth at the UN and so on. I mean, there are people like Baroness Scotland, Baroness Amos. They've all quietly worked through CARICOM at different times to be of great assistance to us. And it's up to the government. The government must use CARICOM with skill to get the kind of support that Dr. Best was talking about. Because a lot of those big personalities that say like Amos and Scotland and so on, it's not that they only know the politicians or the diplomats. They also know a lot of the important military operatives in those countries. And those people not only can give you intelligence, but also do analyses and tell you exactly what is going on, especially with Venezuela and the Caribbean. And as Dr. Best inferred not too long ago, Venezuela has great geopolitical ambitions in this region. And it's something I have not heard the current administration talk about.
Ambassador Austin, could you come a little left?
Mhm.
Yes.
We kind of, yeah. Yes.
Sorry. There's some very disturbing facts about Venezuela and the CARICOM states, especially the Eastern CARICOM states, members of the RSS. One, they've gotten a lot of largesse from Venezuela, and that has affected their outlook on the border controversy.
Mhm.
And in a sense, it's hard to blame them. I've been in St. Vincent when a Venezuelan gunboat warship turned up in the harbor. And that had a tremendous impact on the rest of the society, you know. With Petrocaribe, as I mentioned before, that has created a lot of problems for us with those CARICOM states. I remember just after Carl Greenwich became Minister of Foreign Affairs, and they had a very important meeting on Venezuela. When it came to taking a positive decision that I think is in relation to the decree issued by Maduro. There are members of CARICOM who had left the room and would not come back into the room to say, we support Guyana. And this has not...
But you're echoing my point. In addition to that, CARICOM headquarters is in Guyana. The PPP government carried out an onslaught against young black men, and CARICOM did nothing. Not asked for an investigation, nothing. So how could we trust CARICOM? Right now, there's significant concerns about discrimination and racism, right? It is being addressed in the United States, but not CARICOM. So how can we trust CARICOM?
I think there are different levels, I would say. Ambassador Austin made a good point. We have some good historical friendships in CARICOM. There are different levels of supporting CARICOM. There are CARICOM organs that function well, even though we don't have those statements. I think it's a very important and critical organization. The question, as Ambassador Austin said, how we manage CARICOM. And we shouldn't forget the help that we got from Trinidad, financially, Guyana, and that came due to the relationships between the two.
But that's Trinidad. I'm talking about CARICOM as an institution.
No, but Trinidad is a part of CARICOM, and Trinidad is very influential.
Dr. Best is right.
Trinidad is very influential in CARICOM.
Yeah, Mayor's one small problem. But there are other states, as he mentioned Trinidad.
But I wanted to go on to make this point. Trinidad was, again, the influential in CARICOM. Dr. Eric Williams and Forbes Bourne had a good relationship, his successors and so forth. And we had some financial buy-in, and they came to our rescue. And I think that was the seminal understanding and historical information that caused President Hoyt to say, yes, I will send troops to support. I will assist Trinidad and Tobago. So even though
that was CARICOM then. I agree with you there.
No, but I'm coming to CARICOM now. I hear you, CARICOM then and CARICOM now. To me, it's you can't forget what happened in the past. But I believe that when Petro Carib 2 was put on the table, it was an excellent opportunity for Guyana to begin to practice petro diplomacy, and make it clear to CARICOM and make it obvious to CARICOM that these resources that we have is not only for Guyana, that you can benefit from it, because Guyana was part of Petro Carib 1.
But Dr. Best, who in Guyana has that level of sophistication to make that kind of
argument? I can't answer that question, but what I'm saying is that there's an opportunity for us to...
who in the government? Go ahead.
That's not a fair question, because before there were meetings... I apologize for interrupting you, Dr. Best. There was a meeting, a very important meeting, when this new government took over in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with the old officers from the previous administration. And that's one of the issues that was raised. You have to make a decision as to which organizations, now that you have oil, which organizations you have to join and to bring closer.
But you're making my point. It wasn't done, right? It was discussed, but it wasn't executed.
It was recommended.
Right. Well, the government doesn't have anybody with that kind of expertise. And the people with the expertise, they're suspicious of them because they either believe they have a certain orientation politically or otherwise. So they're devoid of experts. And maybe that's why we're in this problem right now. But I want to ask a question. I began to ask you, what should be the international strategy to bring other countries, international organizations on board, so that we get the kind of results that Dr. Best was talking about, where we have people, countries, institutions actually making pledges that if Venezuela were to make a move, they will come to Guyana's aid. What should be the international posture?
Well, you have to start, as Dr. Best has already said, that you start on the diplomatic side. The military.
But when you say the diplomatic side, explain to our audience what you're talking about. How would this be practiced? How would it be operationalized?
Well, this is an opportunity, given what Venezuela is doing right now, that you have to deploy envoys to the strategic capitals, the U.S., maybe France, certainly Brazil.
Brazil, where we don't have an ambassador either?
Well, you can go to Itimarati. You don't have to have an ambassador in place directly. But there is somebody I think who's acting at the embassy there. But you have to sit down as we did in the 80s and come up with a plan, a diplomatic plan as to what you should do. What you have to get your man well, it's a woman at the UN to get her active on the issue. You have to get your ambassador in Washington working overtime. You know. But you have to sit down and map out the plan. It's not going to happen by just pulling a rabbit out of a hat. And that kind of planning one is not seeing. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in my judgment, is a bit of a problem. And right now is not equipped and geared to really respond to this what is going on the border right now. The
Guyana
Ministry
is a member of the UN Security Council. Should we request some sort of opportunity to address the UN Security Council to bring bring to the world's attention this aggression and potential occupation of Essequibo by Venezuela? Should we request that and have a prime time opportunity to address this issue?
But you can ask the Security Council to convene if an aggression has not taken place. But certainly you can put the United Nations on notice, and you can do that in the UN General Assembly by raising the issue directly in front of you, as Dr. Reid did in 1984. But as I said, it can't be something that is segmented or compartmentalized. It has to be an overall plan that fits neatly. That one section moving smoothly into the other section. It's the CARICOM, the UN, the Western capitals, the region, Latin America. And Latin America is going to Africa. And people tend to forget that in 1977, Cedric Joseph was given the opportunity to present the case for Guyana at the OAU. You mentioned Latin America. You're going to have problems in Latin America with Venezuela. It's hard to penetrate their Latin American nest, you know. Whenever over the last 20, 30 years, when you try to convince Latin Americans that Venezuela is being aggressive and so on, I mean, they listen, but you don't get beyond that with them. That is going to be a problem for them. But as I said, the time is now for them to start planning on a diplomatic strategy to take care of this problem that we have right now. And this is not a problem like problems in the past. This is a very, very serious matter.
Just if I may make a comment, 2 of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council are big investors in Guyana. That's China and the United States. Secondly, China is a big investor in Venezuela and the United States. So via American companies, the geopolitics, we must be able to seize and understand the geopolitics. The US government has begun to ease sanctions in Venezuela.
That was going to come
to restart, let's say their oil drilling in Venezuela. And at the same time that they're doing that, President Maduro is threatening to annex Essequibo. So one has to sit down and analyze that. What does that mean? And the question is, one may ask the question, okay, why is US easing sanctions against Venezuela at this point in time? Why is it? But I can't answer for the US government, but I would say.
But why hasn't Guyana objected? That's the more relevant question.
Right.
Is it in our strategic interest or national interest to object to the US?
I don't want to go. I want to go there.
Let me let Dr. Best finish, and then I'll come to you, Dr.
Okay.
I will just close off here and say that I would say that United States is looking after United States interests. Mm-hmm. Guyana has to be able to understand and maximize Guyana's interests. I think what we're missing is that we're not certain what are the national aspirations of this country, what are our national interests, national values. It is not clear. It used to be clear for me going to school. And then you start bringing in terms like one Guyana, it confuses us in Guyana. We have one people, one nation, one destiny. That's indisputable, right? A lot of people say it's not one Guyana, it's one-sided Guyana. So they make mockery of it because they feel left out. So for me, US is looking after US interests. We have to look after our interests. And our interests cannot be singular. It has to be multilateral. We have
Yeah,
to stop the power. It has to be multilateral. So yes, I yield to Ambassador Austin.
apart
Ambassador
from
Austin, before you answer that, and you can structure your answer to cover both your point and my question. Isn't it in Guyana's, or wasn't, yeah, isn't it in Guyana's national interest to strongly petition the US not to lift sanctions at this point in time against Venezuela, because it will empower Venezuela to be more aggressive towards Guyana? It gives them more resources. They feel that a more moral high ground now, because the United States has mended relations with them. Why? I have never seen a government, to me, that is way at sea, sailing, don't care. Venezuelan, come here so we could get your votes. We don't care if you want to take Essequibo. And by the way, you have a vice president who is promoting a concession saying, give Venezuela part of Guyana.
um, Rickford, Dr. Best is right. You know, when I think Palmerston was asked in 1840 to define the interests of the United Kingdom, Great Britain, British Empire, he said they had no permanent friends, no permanent interests, no permanent enemies. The interests of the state are eternal. So every state has its own interest. In the case of the United States, and I think it would be folly for us to believe that you'll get the United States automatically to intervene and do to prevent Venezuela from doing what it is doing right now. Don't forget that Venezuela is still. I think they're still selling most of their oil to the U.S. The ExxonMobil still has a massive amount of assets in Venezuela. The president of the United States has eased sanctions, allowing Venezuela now to I think sell its oil to a number of people. I am not so sure at the end of the day exactly what the United States will do. And as Dr. Best is quite right, they have their interests. We should have ours. And where those interests coincide, but then we should try and do the best we can to ensure that they do. But apart from that,
But not stick a point here. Not, yes, we understand U.S. interests. My question is, the U.S. will do what it needs to do to protect its interests. We need to do the same thing, and publicly, at least, should the government object to that, which would help to give the population more confidence, and also to let Venezuela know, hey, listen, we know what's going on, we're looking on, we are willing to make our voices, or to sound our voice to prevent this from happening. And I mean, the United States might just completely ignore our petitions, but at least in our national interest, shouldn't we do that?
yes, I mean
Go ahead, Ambassador. I'll make a comment afterwards.
Yeah, just very quickly, it's worth the effort through the embassy or by through some direct method.
Or if it's a public statement by the president.
Oh yes, yeah, you can do that. But mind you, Rickford, I don't think the Americans have done decided. I think as far as
Of course.
concerned, and maybe we might have to try another tactic to get the Americans to be more closer to us than they are at the present time. You know,
And in the meantime, look at how this thing is evolving. Instead of trying to build relationships with the members of Congress who can influence the administration, and usually that's how it works. Israel go through members of Congress, all the other countries. This government has been attacking members of Congress who expressed interest in Guyana, all of the black ones at least. Right now, according to the Starbuck News in their editorial, they say, well, now the government realized who they have been lecturing to and the power that Leader Jeffries wields in Congress. They are now trying to mend the relation. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but who can this government go to in the United States other than the administration to help influence the administration to develop some sort of policy strategy with them to deter Venezuela?
I think the government was misadvised to get into a confrontation with those members of Congress. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries is not um, an ordinary person. I mean, he's a very powerful figure within the United States
He's the
administration.
second most powerful black person in America,
And
or the
I
most.
thought it was a political error on the part of the government to get into conflict with him. Um, he has enormous influence in the House of Representatives, and it would have been in our best interest, especially knowing that the kind of problems that we would face from time to time, to try and keep him on our side. Of course, maybe they've been influenced by your close association with him. I don't know.
No, I just think they don't have respect for black people. But go ahead,
But
No, no,
I
sorry.
would,
Dr.
I
Best
would,
was
no, I would
Dr. Best.
look at it
yeah, Dr. Best.
differently. Yeah, I would think that it's not an easy call or easy shot across the U.S. bow with a statement like that. I'm not saying it's something that shouldn't be considered, but I would think that it would do significant good if President Ali were able to make a trip to Washington and have a meeting with the President of the United States at least. Could you imagine they had a State of Ghana meeting, the President of the United States, uh, at this point in time with Venezuela threatening us? And as Ambassador Austin said, your prior diplomatic work, the work you've been doing in diplomatic work over the years would allow and engender those things to happen. The relationships you create at the subnational levels within the United States, your friends that the friendship that you develop would allow that to happen, because I think that would send a strong message to Venezuela if President Biden was to host President Ali at a meeting, or even if it's not him, let's say Vice President or the Secretary of State. So I
But the
think,
Secretary of State was just in Guyana. The matter was not even raised.
all right, but remember, I'm not speaking to you, Rickford, right? I'm making the point here, right? I
Oh, I
hear
got
you.
you. I got.
I'm saying that imagine the influence and what it will do for the nation state of Guyana. And it sends a message and signals a message that we've missed, the government has missed, misguided, misadvised itself perhaps, be misguided on how to deal with the United States of America. It's a very complex society. It's a strategic power. It's a global police, so to speak. It's got friends and enemies all over the world. And to deal with them, you need as much allies on your side. And you can't discount the power of the U.S. Congress. It's a bicameral. It's a very, very powerful. One congressman could hold up a legislation in the United States of America. One congressman. So you have to understand the power of the congressmen. And now we're talking about the Hakeem Jeffries. Let's take the name away and take the race of the person. Look at the appointment alone. You see the power there.
But
And if
Dr. Best, you see,
for some reason the race and the name made a difference, then it is a catastrophic error on the part of the people.
all of this has to come out of
I'll repeat this. His
careful.
name, sorry, I said the name.
Go ahead, Dr. Best.
No,
Come
no,
answer
no,
your
no.
question.
Dr. Best wasn't quite finished.
I was saying if the name and the face of the minority in the House of Congress was anything to do with the conduct of the government, it is a catastrophic miscalculation, mistake they made. Yeah. Because that is a very important and powerful office, and we can get so much done for this country by having exceptionally good and positive relations with the office of Mr. Hakeem Jeffries, not to mention the office of the Speaker. Yeah. Not to mention, and those are I think relations we have to develop, and we can only develop it on the diplomatic front. I just want to compliment Ambassador Austin's talk about the African Unity, the AU. It's a very important and emerging, powerful organization. We should have an ambassador there. It's a very important and emerging organization in the geopolitics of the world today. Very, very powerful.
Not only that, Dr. Best.
I'll pause here.
They've built up a pretty good relationship with Venezuela. And often we find when you go to speak to them about the border controversy, while they listen, again, they tend to be quite hesitant in taking a position which might antagonize or bring them in conflict with Venezuela. It's an area that we have to do a lot of work on, you know. I don't know who's the ambassador now to in Brussels, but they have to work through the ACP to get to a lot of those African states. That is one. Carl Grenade was trying to rebuild that relationship, and he was doing a magnificent job. But within the last couple of years, I haven't heard a single word about an
No,
ambassador.
no, no. The government's strategic interest is in India, Pakistan. I'm sorry, go ahead. No, no. This is a listen. This is a very serious problem. This government lacks strategic thinking. Their thinking is only in line with money and ethnicity. That's just my view. And it's a terrible problem that the country finds itself in, because what's going to happen is that Venezuela, and like I said, um, I don't want to reveal any information that might alarm people, but we are in a very serious situation. And let's assume that Venezuela decides to make a move and occupy. Let's not say invade. Invade is going to scare people. Occupy. They're seeking a mandate from the people to occupy Essequibo illegally. And there's no way, we have to see it this way, that there's no way that they can get a mandate from the people and not execute it. Absent significant deterrent. Now, look at what's going on in the world. The world's on fire. The Middle East is on fire. The U.S. government is focused on that, trying to stop that war in the Middle East between Israel and Hezbollah, or Israel and Palestinian people, from spreading. More than like I see now, Hezbollah has gotten involved. They just bombed Lebanon. Now we have the same problem with Russia and Ukraine. The United States is not going to have no time with Guyana unless there is significant influence being brought to bear on the administration to intervene. And to me, at least by now, there should have been a significant warning from the United States, from the UN, from Britain, from Canada, from Germany, to Venezuela. Nothing. This government is not doing anything. The only thing we can see them visibly doing is, hey, Venezuelans, come, we want your vote, because we could be in some political problem in the next election. And all we want to do is make sure we displace these certain people, ethnic voters, which won't vote for us, because, it's one certain Guyana. So we want you all to come and take their place. That's the signal the government is sending to the people. Other than that, there's nothing going on. Venezuela is knocking at the border, and Bar Jagler is saying, hey, come, and give me some food. In secret meeting with the Venezuelans. Some of the military operatives may have been in that meeting. So,
Rickford, they signed a joint declaration with a joint statement with the opposition, to which they committed themselves to designing and implementing a major, robust diplomatic plan.
You mean after the Venezuelan invaded the place?
No, well, you have to. I think, to be fair to them, give them some time to see when they're going to get their show on the road.
The first thing, here why I'm so concerned, alarmed. When we got photographs from sources on the border, and we started to publish them and said Venezuelans were amassing on the border, the government issued a statement and said it wasn't true. They want to, I'm not sure if it's appease, or they feel that if they notify the population, ratchet up international awareness, that Venezuela is going to get more aggressive. They will get more aggressive in any way. So I'm not sure what's the strategy, but people are concerned. People in the diaspora are concerned. People at home are concerned, and the government is just chilling out. Barjack there was in the back room meeting with the enemies, and people are so suspicious of him, because he is saying, and he never retracted that position, that he believes that we should give Venezuela part of Guyana.
Yeah, but I make a point earlier.
There is a silver lining, and Dr. Bell.
So I'll give you guys your last your statement, your opportunity to do a closing statement.
Go
ahead, Ambassador Austin.
No, well, I just wanted to say, and I wanted to see if it's what Dr. Best can confirm it or not. In lifting sanctions, they gave them 6 months. for them to get their act together internally with the opposition. That sanction will snap back into place if they do anything to violate the agreement they made, which led to the lifting of sanctions. So it's unlikely, and Dr. Best can tell me if I'm right or wrong,
Unlikely what?
that there'll be any major incursion into Ghana in that 6-month period.
I think it's
I'm not so sure, but go ahead, Dr.
No,
Best.
well, that's Dr. Best.
No, I think it's a good it's a good analysis, because we look at, because they signed this agreement in Barbados, unfortunately.
Barbados,
Right.
the one in Barbados, yes.
Yeah, so in
In
Barbados.
Barbados. In Barbados.
All right, Rick. Send it in Barbados, and I have to think that there will be some amount of concern on the part of the Venezuelans whether or not they should make a move against Guyana, having regard to the fact that they signed this agreement. So yes, it could be one of the things that the Americans have shoved down their throat to slow them down where that is concerned, because US doesn't want to open another front in terms of committing, because they have strategic interests in Guyana.
Mm-hmm.
They do have strategic interests in Guyana, and they have in Venezuela. And powerful nations go and support and protect their strategic interests. I don't think they want to open another front here. But it doesn't mean, in my estimation, we should zero out the possibility of this military adventurism by Maduro, who may want to go down in history as the only person to solve the Venezuela-Guyana problem, as he said.
Yeah.
So we have to be extremely, I would say, extremely.
I agree with you. I think it's a political strategy on Maduro's part to show that he's a strong man, because if they give the opposition the opportunity to contest a free and fair elections, it's clearly to me that the Maduro would lose.
Yes, yeah, so that is what all of the analysts are saying in Venezuela and beyond Venezuela, and that is the reason why he's blocked the Maria Molina from
right.
From
and you know, when you have a cornered dog, they get pretty aggressive. So I don't believe that Maduro is going to back off of this thing.
But Rickford, you're not wrong, and I'm sure I have the agreement of Dr. Best. Whatever they are doing, we have to be prepared on the other side. Whatever they're doing, you know.
Closing remarks, Abbas Austin. 1 minute.
No, as I've said at the beginning, this is a very serious matter. I think the administration should get its act together as quickly as possible to have a robust diplomatic plan in place, and as Dr. Best said, have the military side of what we're doing, make it visible, give people a reassurance that Guyana at least is preparing or getting itself in order to defend the country.
There was one military activity that was I think was intended to give the people some hope. Let me see if I can find it.
You mean the announcement today that there might be joint patrols with the United States?
No. Let me show you guys.
Refer, you know, it was announced this evening by the ambassador.
You had the chief of staff there, and then you had dictator Mickey Mouse right there. I mean, that was in Essequibo, right? That's that. And you know what he announced? He said, "We're building a stadium and we're bringing international cricket to Essequibo." That will deter the Venezuelans, wouldn't it?
Refer, we've had a very serious discussion this evening. We should keep it serious, you know.
That's a serious point. But thank you, Dr. Best.
No, I endorse the comments from.
So you're saying that was not a serious? That's the president and the chief of staff in Essequibo.
Well, again, I listen. There are many activities that are being taken place right now. I don't want to comment on the picture. I want to take the position that President Ali is the commander-in-chief. He'll have good military advice from the chief of staff. I would expect that he has to act as commander-in-chief. His staff becomes his principal advisor. There are other persons in cabinet who will advise him there. But I want to say to him that he has people outside of the cabinet and in the opposition and in civil society that can come together and assist him with having a comprehensive defense strategy for Guyana. So again, if in his mind he thought that that would have rallied the Essequibans, I have to leave him with that. I want to say that I agree with Ambassador Austin that we're in a serious situation here. I would say that the government should do everything so that it's not perceived as trying to eke out political benefit from this likely disaster that Ghana can face if Venezuela were to cross the border, because it can only turn back and ask its own population to support it, which is the duty of the population. Article 33, I think, of the Constitution says every citizen, it's the duty of every citizen to defend Guyana. It is the duty of every citizen to defend Guyana. So we all have a duty. The other thing I want to mention is that, again, just to repeat, it doesn't matter what the VP says about the possibility of any piece of land or a passage through the Atlantic Ocean. Our borders have been fixed by the Constitution. So that is only rhetoric. It cannot be changed unless there's a referendum in this country. So, and the the Attorney General, rather, in his speech, also said that the borders are set in the Constitution. So I am not worried about the government. No president or prime minister can give away any land. But I do understand the effect it has when it's being said on the Guyanese population. It puts them on a sense of fear that a man could give away something. So I'm not worried about that. And to the Guyanese who might be worried, just be sure that the Constitution is clear on the borders of Guyana, and only we in Guyana can change those borders via a referendum. We must have confidence in that. That is part of our defense, and that defense is in the Constitution, and that Constitution is called the Burnham Constitution, 1980. And that might be a good note for me to pause to the people of Guyana. That Burnham has given us a Constitution that is
That's a good place to end the show.
Only we can change it.
Great. I think we had a great discussion tonight, gentlemen. Thank you guys for taking the time to come and join Conversation with Rickford Burke. And I look forward to a continued conversation on this subject, because I'm pretty sure the issue is going to be a burning issue going forward for many months to come.
Okay. Thank you, Rickford. Thanks.
Thank you. And thanks to the audience for listening. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, Gary.